everyone, what's going on? Welcome to another episode of 2 Minutes to Review. It's Matt.
And it's Zach.
Longest album review in under 2 minutes wins our little game here. And we do new albums, we do classic albums. You click the picture, you're probably just as confused as I was. We are reviewing a brand new album from Limp Bizkit.
Not only has it been 10 years since Limp Bizkit has released anything, but, you know, to be frank...
Be Zach, don't be Frank.
Oh, I'll be Zach. But I'm more shocked at the level of excitement for a new Limp Bizkit album. I mean, a lot of surprises here. I mean, believe it or not, it's been a year since we did an episode of Am I Missing Something about the rise and fall and the love and hate of nu metal. And of course, obviously, we talked a lot about
God, it was that long ago?
Yeah, it's been a year.
Jesus.
And I feel like since we did that episode, Limp Bizkit has kind of slowly found their way back into, you know, mainstream conversation. Back in August, Fred Durst made a ton of headlines when not only did Limp Bizkit play Lollapalooza, but he started doing shows in a really creepy dad look, and, you know, the dad vibes kind of thing was going around. And suddenly people were talking about Fred Durst for the first time in many, many years. And even just thinking back to when they're going to do a small little tour, and then the last minute they canceled it. And it was just Fred Durst saying, you know, it's just too crazy out there right now of COVID. I remember you and I going, why is it that in 2021, it's Fred Durst that's making the most sense? Like, this is not right.
I was going to say, we gave him praise for that. We gave him a lot of kudos for, you know, saying, hey, you could have gone out on the road for this, you know, for the first time in many years. And no, you know what? We're going to hold off because the world's still kind of crazy. And
yeah,
lots of props.
Why does he make sense? Why does he make sense? And then, so
because nothing makes sense in 2021. It's backwards world.
Fast forward to a few months later, and rather than do the standard building up hype for a new album, especially when it's your first album in 10 years, they decide, you know what? In 3 days, it's going to be Halloween. Screw it. Let's just release a new album on Halloween, and let's just call it Still Sucks. And it would kind of make more sense if Halloween was on a Friday or Saturday, but we're talking about a Sunday on Halloween, and they decided, screw it, we're just going to release a new album. Here you go.
Yeah, that's kind of weird. You were like, you told me, hey, the new Limp Bizkit album's coming out. Oh, okay.
You didn't believe me. You didn't believe me. Yeah.
Yeah. He talked to me on Saturday, and he's telling me, oh, the new Limp Bizkit's coming out. All right. I'm thinking like maybe Tuesday or Wednesday, you know, have some time, you know, a couple weeks maybe. No, tomorrow.
I'm not going to lie. I'm also still not sure if it was the smartest strategy for releasing an album, but that's a whole different debate and argument. Here we are, after pretty much working on this album for a very, very long time and making it clear that they were not going to release anything until they were happy with it. Here we are, a new Limp Bizkit album, Still Sucks. That's the album title. I'm not getting into my review yet. That's actually the album title. But before we also share our thoughts on the nu metal Godfather's latest effort, we have some exciting news. As you all know, Lucky 13 Beard Co. been really great sponsors of our podcast. Ed is just a great guy, and they create really great beard oils and balms and just beard products. Ed wanted to do something special with us.
He wanted to collaborate with us in some fashion. So we were thinking, well, how do you do a beard oil based on a podcast? So we started to think, well, what would rock and roll smell like? Well, there's plenty of things it could smell like. Not normally the greatest. Great. So, you know, we really started to boil it down to what is it going to smell like? And there was one person who, when we both kind of thought of the name or just like what he represented, and you started to dig into who he was, there's some really great things that could come out of it. And we're talking about the one and the only Lemmy Kilmister.
That's
and
right.
When you start to think about Lemmy, what do you think of? Jack Daniels, Coke. That's what he drank. Smoked like a fiend. And he always wore leather. So when you put those things together, they actually come together in a very awesome way. When I was telling Ed about this, it was kind of interesting. He's like, well, what do you want this to smell like? I said, throw these things together and let me know how it smells. Tell me if it's awful. And he put it together, and he's like, this is probably one of the best things that we've done so far. But it works, and it works really, really well. It's got the bite of the bourbon, the sweetness of the cola, A little bit of the burn from the tobacco and that nice hint of leather on the end. And if you ever wanted to try a beard oil, I can almost guarantee you that you are going to love the way this smells. I love it. I gave it to a couple people when I was wearing it. I'm like, tell me, what do you think of this? And they said, that smells amazing. What is it? And I told them that it's our beard oil. And they're like, wow, can I buy it? I'm like, well, you got to wait a little bit, but yes. So how can you get it? You go to Lucky13, the number beardco.com. You go on there and you put it in your cart. Use the code EFP10 at checkout. You're going to get 10% off of your order and off of any other beard oils or balms that you want. I mean, if you want a beard comb, he's got, beard combs and accessories. So there's so much that you can get. And I really hope that you try this because you're going to smell great. You're going to feel great. And finally, you can smell epic. So Lucky13, the number Beard Co. Go and pick up our exclusive Lemmy beard oil. I think you're going to love the way you smell on this one.
I thought we were crazy for creating our own coffee blend with rootless coffee. And here we are creating our own beard oil. You know what's even more insane than that?
That we're doing a Limp Bizkit review?
Yes, we are. And guess what?
First. No, I'm going first.
Oh, I was going to offer it to you, sir.
Okay, well, I'm going first.
Let me know when you're ready.
Count it in.
3, 2, 1. Break stuff.
So, yeah. I can't figure out who this album is for. And that's been like the resonating thought in my head because it's not catchy enough, good enough, or long enough to bring in new fans. And it deviates way too far from any positive nostalgia to keep old Bizkit fans really interested. The closest thing to anything positively nostalgic on the album is Dirty Rotten Biscuit, which rehashes the main riff from Hot Dog off of Chocolate Starfish and Hot Dog Flavored Water. Now, there are some good points to this album. Out of Style, it's really the only song on here with a real message, and Fred goes on to say we should be on the same team. If we ain't, then we nothing. But then he goes on to immediately discredit himself and says, damn, that got serious for a second. I would say delirious for the record. So, yeah, okay. So he completely changes his message. The song Goodbye is easily the best song on the album by a long shot. And this is even a weird song by Limp Bizkit standards because it sounds like if Sublime and Rome backed Fred Durst. So that's kind of interesting. And now you get into the rest of the album. You bring out The Worst in Me, brings in Results May Vary vibes. And depending on what you think of that album, for me, it does not bring back great memories. It's even hard to get behind Dad Vibes as a single because Fred Durst really doesn't even sound interested to be on the track at all. And then Snacky Poo. This is probably one of the longest songs on here. It's 4 minutes and 11 seconds. But the problem is that there's an interview with Wes Borland for 40% of the track, which goes on to mock, I guess, podcasters. And yeah, well, okay, great. So if you take that minute and change off of this album, you're left with a half an hour long album. So what's the point? I mean, I can't really say anything more about this other than this is a really lazy album. Like, even Turn It Up, another track on here. This is probably the laziest song I've heard in quite some time. The bass riff is probably something you could write in 30 seconds. And honestly, in summation, if I have to compare this album to anything, it's a candy cigarette. What's the point? The candy part is awful, and you won't look cool smoking it, no matter how hard you try.
Time's locked in. So between 1 to 5 chocolate starfishes, what would you give this album?
1.5. There is no point to this at all.
I want to actually get into my review.
And
then I want to get into this because I got thoughts, and then we can go into. Because by the way, before anyone comments going, "Oh, 2 minutes of review, and this is like a long ass episode." Yeah, it's a competition, but guess what? We're going to go over and talk more. So I know we're going to have a lot of discussion here. So I want to get into my review before we run out of steam. Count me in. I want to keep this rolling. Another pun.
You're doing it for the nookie, huh?
The what?
The nookie.
The what?
3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, so the first 3 songs on this album, Out of Style, Dirty Rotten Biscuit, and Dad Vibes, gives you a little hope that maybe there's going to be enough nostalgia here to make you think fondly of when you didn't have such high expectations from a band like Limp Bizkit in the late 90s, early 2000s. And maybe it could be a fun nostalgia trip. Well, then the album goes down a really frustrating rabbit hole because you got songs like You Bring Out the Worst in Me, Barnacle, and Pill Popper that has the band sounding or trying really too hard to sound like the Deftones. And then you got songs like Turn It Up, Bitch, and Snacky Poo that finds them trying really hard to sound like Cypress Hill. And what's worse about that is that neither sound that inspired. It would be one thing if maybe they try to blend it together, but they don't even do that. And it just sounds really like a desperate yet not desperate attempt to sound like those bands. And then you get into their uninspired cover of In Excess's Don't Change. And then you got the song Love the Hate, which is, it's funny that they mention Eminem in it when they're talking about like, oh, everyone just loves to hate on them, but we don't care. Well, guess what? That sounds like a really terrible sketch from the Marshall Mathers LP. It's just an uninspired album. And it's crazy because everyone from Borland to Fred has made it clear that they were not going to just release it for the sake of releasing it because they knew that they're going to get shit on regardless. So I just don't understand how this could have been an album that reinvigorated fans, even the casual fans who maybe gave up on them and be like, you know what? No, they were still fun. Instead, you get an album that you could argue that they put just as much energy into making as they did in releasing it, which aka means none at all. So here you are instead with an album that somewhat confirms what its title implies. Maybe it's not a complete suckfest, but it's not a good album either.
And how many chocolate starfishes out of 5?
Out of 5 chocolate starfishes, I was gonna be kind of kind and give it 2, but I think even that's too kind. I'm gonna give it a 1.5 star too. It's just, I think you said it perfectly. Also, talking about dad vibes, how it's as catchy as, that's actually one of the better songs on this album. But you're right, he doesn't sound like he wants to be there. No one on this album sounds like they wanted to be on this record.
They could
have made a nostalgia trip, like literally during the summer. I think since we did our episode of Am I Missing Something, it's been clear that nu metal, people have been slowly looking back on nu metal with fondness. And of course you associate that with Limp Bizkit. And I feel like this album could have been a great chance for them to be like, yeah, just have fun with us. But instead, like, they just made an album that reassured everyone, like, no, you were right to shit on us. You're right. We're not good. Like, it was just blah.
This whole album, like I said, I can't figure out what the intent of this album is. If it's to say that you still suck, congratulations, you've accomplished it.
Yeah.
If it's just a tour behind something because you're going to be going out on tour, okay, I guess if you want to tour with this, you could.
But they're not even touring behind it. That's also
right.
Crazy.
Well, they planned on it before they canceled. But you put together a half an hour of music. How long did this take you? If this was the original intent, because this would not be the first time that Limp Bizkit scrapped an album. So
that's true too.
If they put together an album where they weren't happy with it completely, scrapped it, and then started again, all right, maybe I can get behind that. But a half an hour, if you think about this, every other Limp Bizkit album, and I have all the times here, $3 Bill, y'all, 1 hour. Significant Other, it's right short of an hour, like 59 minutes.
You've done more research on Limp Bizkit albums than I think anyone really should, but continue.
I used to love Limp Bizkit. I put a little bit of extra into this.
Well, there you go. I feel like this album could have really reassured fans who used to defend them that no, you're right to to view them as at least as a guilty pleasure. Don't be embarrassed that you. But no.
So
not this album.
Chocolate Starfish, 1 hour 15 minutes. Results May Vary, 1 hour and 8 minutes. Results May Vary is 1 hour and 8 minutes. That album is awful. Okay. So I don't past Results May Vary. I dropped off of Limp Bizkit real hard because they did that Unquestionable Truth album. And that was probably the last time you heard Limp Bizkit in their quote metal form, a la like Break Stuff and songs like that. But Gold Cobra really to me was the last. That was like the last bell for Limp Bizkit, because anything.
Well, that was their last album, so yeah.
Well, they put out singles, and they supposedly have this hidden album that's somewhere on the deep corners of the web that maybe Fred Durst doesn't even know where it is anymore.
Well, it's funny because I actually, back in 2015, so 6 years ago, I interviewed Wes Borland for metalinsider.net, this site that I used to be a assistant editor for.
Do you know where the album is? Did he tell you?
No, he didn't tell me. But even during that interview, he was saying how, yeah, it's just that we're working on the album kind of sporadically. It's really just up to Fred now. Like, I did all my parts. It's just, if Fred is just, he knows that whatever we release, it's going to be kind of pooped on. So he just wants to make the best album possible. So it's like, and he said that in multiple interviews. Fred has even said that, like, to be working on something for so long and be so particular, and this is what you deliver?
This is a half an hour.
It's crazy.
If it took me as long to do my job as it took him to put out a new album for a half an hour, and for it to deliver like this, are you crazy? Anybody else would be fired.
It's also, I think you're being kind when you're saying it's a half an hour, because there's that sketch that on Snacky Poo that you were talking about with the fake radio podcast interview.
Yep, I took that out.
I don't think Love the Hate should be considered a song. I'm sorry, but like, that's just a Marshall Mathers LP sketch ripoff.
Okay, I'm giving the track time. Okay, so if you want to take that off, you're probably at about 28 and change.
Yeah, I mean, it's a short freaking album. And it's not even like anything on there is really, it's just, even calling it fluff is being nice.
And
like, I really want to hear what true diehard Limp Bizkit, if they're really, I'm sure there are, but like.
Well, that was me.
Yeah, well. Yeah.
I will be the first to say that I completely wore out Significant Other and Chocolate Starfish on CD to the point where I had to buy another copy.
You even, in our very, very, very first episode, not even like if you have to pick three, but our very first episode of the podcast, where we discussed which albums, if you had to pick 3 albums to remaster, you chose Limp Bizkit's Significant Other.
Yeah.
And I thought our podcast was doomed from the start when you did that too. So from day one, you've actually been defending Limp Bizkit.
I have. And I wish I could defend them to some degree on this, but I can't. And I wouldn't shit on this just for the sake of shitting on it. I wouldn't say that they still suck if they came out with something that was even like half of what Gold Cobra was, because there were some good songs on Gold Cobra. And I even think a latter day Limp Bizkit should be able to put out a single on the level of like Shotgun, because I think that's what they should have done, is something kind of like that, even if they wanted to be considered somewhat relevant again. But there's nothing even close to that on here.
They could have done a nostalgia trip while still sounding modern and still sounding fresh. They just went in a weird direction. I don't know if it was just for the sake of a direction, or if they just decided to screw it and just decided to jerk off in a studio.
It probably was the latter. And one of the things that kind of got me on here on Turn It Up Bitch, on that song, like I said earlier, it sounds like you could have written that bass riff in 30 seconds, noodling around in the studio, and Fred just throws some lyrics to it. But to actually record it and put it on an album and say that this is something that you're proud of, I don't know. Like, I don't know where their heads were at. If you told me some of these were like a B vibe on Results May Vary, I would say that's a possibility. But then again, for some of the references that Fred makes on here, I don't know if, well, actually, no, maybe he could have, because another reference that he makes on Turn It Up Bitch, he references the Master Chief from Halo. So yeah, that actually kind of does check out year-wise.
I mean, honestly, wouldn't surprise me if maybe the music is old and he did new vocals and or re-recorded new vocals. I think it just goes to the fact that at best it sounds stale. Like everything,
Stale.
yeah. Like
It's not even stale. It's just
I mean,
not
and that's being a
good.
compliment. That's being a compliment. And I think what makes me more angry about this is that I feel duped. Going into this year, I was like questioning, was Limp Bizkit really as bad as everyone tried to make them out to be? Were we just kind of overdone with Fred Durst's antics at the height of their career? Like, I actually had hope that maybe they could prove the critics wrong. I feel just like a fool for even thinking that maybe they could redeem themselves with this album. I think
And
that's
I've
what
been,
makes me more angry
yeah.
about like this whole thing is that like I actually for a second gave them the benefit of the doubt.
And I thought that they were trying to, and they've been trying to redeem themselves since they did The Unquestionable Truth.
Yeah.
That album, and if I remember the promos correctly, they did like this viral web promo thing in the very early days of viral promotion with bands and secret websites, and it was really cool the way they did it. And it was another really short album, but this was a lot of it was
Well,
full
that
of
was an
music. There were
EP too. They even admitted that that was more of an EP
well,
than
it
a
was
full-fledged album.
it was, but let me say this: it was 7 tracks, and it came out at 29 minutes. This is 12 tracks on this new album, and it's barely hitting 29 minutes if you subtract out that other like interlude.
Yeah.
That one song that you mentioned, I forget the title, but
Love the hate.
yeah, that one. Since 2005, I've been waiting for Limp Bizkit to redeem themselves. I tried to say, okay, you know what? I was going to get into Gold Cobra. I kind of did, but it just didn't feel like the Limp Bizkit that I knew.
Yeah.
And then they released some other singles. And those singles, they weren't the greatest because I think Fred was just trying to impress, Cash Money because they were on Cash Money at the time.
I would
And
love to find out the story of what happened because this was released on Shertone Records, a different
right.
label. They never really explained what happened with Cash Money.
I, mm,
Maybe the record they've been working on is in Cash Money's vaults.
maybe. And if I'm not mistaken, I think that one's called the March of the Disco Elephants or the Stampede of the Disco Elephants.
Stampede of the Disco Elephants. Stampede of
Yeah.
the Disco Elephants. That was
So,
that quickly became like the Chinese democracy
right.
of new metal.
And when you first told me that the new Limp Bizkit album was coming out, I almost thought it was that. But then you told me it was Still Sucks. And I was like, what? But they still have other singles that never hit an album. Like one is called Ready to Go. The other one is Endless Slaughter. And granted, they're not great songs by any stretch of the imagination, but still it's Limp Bizkit. Like
it's a little bit more innovative sounding, at least. Not innovative, but a little more effort seemed to go into them.
They sounded, even if Endless Slaughter wasn't great, they still sounded like they had some fire into them. Granted, on a track like Pill Popper on this album, they sounded like they put all of their energy on that track, and that was it. They left nothing else.
And even that sounded like a piss poor attempt at sounding like the Deftones.
I will say this. If Fred is trying to play like a dad and have, quote, dad vibes on that song and not sound interested, great, you succeeded. But that's not how it comes off if that's the lead single. Like, I can't think of another lead single from Limp Bizkit where Fred sounded so disinterested. Like, Eat You Alive on Results May Vary was...
he had some fire there.
There was some fire in there, and he was like, I think, dissing on Christina Aguilera or Brittany at the time. Obviously, Nookie, and then Rollin' on Chocolate Starfish, and Faith when they first came out, even though it was a George Michael cover, they made it their own thing. So Limp Bizkit has always put like a lot of effort into their lead singles, and this one is just, oh, here's the dad vibes, and here's some camels or rhinos or something that doesn't even make any sense.
And what's worse is that that's probably the standout track still. That and Dirty Rotten Biscuits, which I forgot that I was like, oh, this does sound kind of familiar. You're right. That was a sample of an old freaking Limp Bizkit song too.
The minute I heard it, I jumped back to Chocolate Starfish because I knew it came off of there. It wasn't Significant Other. And Hot Dog, I think, is the second track on that album. See, this is how much of a Limp Bizkit nerd I was. I told you I loved Limp Bizkit. I jumped on there and I put it on, and the moment that guitar riff hit, it's Hot Dog.
Listen, I know I kind of poop on you for admitting for being such an old school Bizkit fan, but the truth of the matter is, and I think this is why fans our age range still have a little bit of hope for Limp Bizkit, is that for so many, they were really the first introduction to heavy music. I mean, for me, before I even really got into Metallica, I saw Limp Bizkit and Korn on TRL as a kid in middle school. And then that led me to hearing Rage Against the Machine. And then that had led me to kind of discovering more of Metallica and becoming the Metallica head I was. Like, so I think there's going to be some nostalgia always attached to those bands. And you want to believe that you weren't such a dumbass as a kid when it came to your musical tastes. I think Korn, in their defense, has done a decent job over the years at kind of making you feel justified for liking them. Whereas Limp Bizkit, it's like every time you're trying to give them the benefit of the doubt, they just make you feel like a fool.
I don't think that I feel like a fool for ever liking Limp Bizkit. I feel like a fool for still believing in Limp Bizkit. I know what I like. I know what I've heard, and I know that the first 3 albums were great albums. Once you get past Chocolate Starfish, it is a slow descent into, I think, Fred Durst's ego overtaking the band. And
that's fair.
And one of the biggest complaints that I have on this, even more so than everything else, is that, you made that comment about Wes Borland and Fred, taking his time on the album. But I think that my biggest problem is that not only does Fred sound uninterested at times, his vibe, quote, dad vibe, kind of translates over into Wes's guitar playing too, because there are times where he tries to be innovative and maybe tries to do like a dubstep thing here and there to try to sound maybe a little bit fresh. But then other times it's just, trying to Limp Bizkit gent for the best way to say it, that is just chug for chug, and there's no substance of his guitar playing when I know Wes can play. And Wes's other band, Blacklight Burn, proved that years ago that Wes can play. So yeah, I can't see any merit in this album, period.
So I think it's a good time to stop, only because we've officially given more thought into Limp Bizkit than they obviously did on their last album. On their new album, Still Sucks.
How long are we into this podcast right now?
We've produced a longer episode of our podcast than they did of a new album. Let that sink in for a second before you start criticizing the name of our series and our thoughts on the album. Like, just let that sink in for a second. And with that said, let's get to the real meat of what we are supposed to be doing on this episode, giving the longest review in under 2 minutes. Matt, would you like to find out your score?
I can guarantee you it's probably in the 3-minute range.
Not in the 3-minute range, but definitely not in the 2-minute range. It is 2 minutes and 35 seconds. That's how long the review was. You went over for sure.
Yeah, there was no way I was staying under 2 minutes on this one. Not a chance.
I actually was trying to stay under 2 minutes just so I didn't feel like I was giving the band too much of my brain power for delivering such a half-ass. Well, how did I do?
You did not stay under 2 minutes. 2 minutes, 4 seconds.
Ooh, so close. Really, no one wins though. Let's be
honest. Not in this one.
Or are we wrong? Are we being too pessimistic? Or do we miss the point? Are we just feeding into the haters? And are we missing the brilliance and genius of Fred Durst and company?
Are the haters going to eat us alive?
They might. You can eat us alive on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, at Epic Footnote. Also subscribe to our YouTube channel to hear more podcasts like this. Yeah, believe it or not, we do new metal discussions as well as check out some pretty cool videos that we produced. Thank you so much to our sponsors, Lucky 13 Beard Co. can't believe I'm saying this, but we have our own beard oil thanks to them. Go to lucky13beardco.com. Use the code EFP10 to get 10% off your order and to purchase our own beard oil, the Lemmy. And also thank you to Rootless Coffee. They work with a lot of podcasts, brands, artists on their own blends of coffee, including us. Go to rootlesscoffee.com. Purchase a bag of our own coffee to support us, as well as use the code EPICROAST, all caps, to get 15% off of your next order. Thank you guys so much for listening. Keep on rolling.
I'm going to do things my way because it's my way or the highway.